All right, we'll go ahead and get started.
Is it going?
Yep. So welcome everybody to the Cabarrus County Beekeepers February meeting. Have we got any first-time guests with us tonight? Raise your hand. Excellent. Thank you for coming. If you have questions, just grab somebody after the meeting, or we'll talk all night about bees. That's how everybody usually is. All right. Just a few reminders. The meal sign up for next month is on the back table if you're interested in that. Door prizes and 50/50 tickets you can get from the back table. And then we're going to move right into our panel discussion, which we're looking forward to tonight. Yes, double check your names on the bill list. There were some people thought they signed up and they didn't, so just make sure you're on there if you're interested in. But tonight we've got some of our own. We're going to share some knowledge and answer questions. We've got Master Beekeeper Mike Kerr in the back. He'll be up. Master Keeper Bryan Fisher and Journeyman Beekeeper Mike Wallace. And it'll be moderated by our very own Bob Blackwelder. So if y'all want to take over.
Okay, good to see everybody tonight.
Turn the mic on.
On. Is that better? Yeah. Too loud. Scare me. Good to see everybody tonight. Good crowd. I was kind of anticipating a pretty good crowd, but why? The weather's getting better. As the weather gets better and it's time to be thinking about bees, beekeepers get more active. How about that? Just like our bees do. But it's good to see everybody tonight. A little bit different. We got a panel of distinguished experts. And so I've been asked to moderate this thing, which means to keep them fist fighting, because beekeepers can differ a little bit on opinions. That's one of the beautiful things about beekeeping. We all won't necessarily agree on everything. So that kind of keeps it interesting. And the question I always have is, if you do it a certain way, why do you do it that way? Do you know why you're doing it that way? So again, we'll see some opinions a little bit up here. Now, what I've done is I've got a little list of some subjects, okay? So I'm going to give my subject, and then we'll let them kind of rotate and talk about that subject a little bit and their opinion of that subject. Instead of just giving me a question, I can quiz them about different point-blank answers, okay? Give me that answer. I'm not going to do it that way. We're going to have a general discussion to get their opinions on certain things. And then maybe between them, they can debate to some degree of, is that a better way or not a better way, or when would you do that type situation. So we'll get some opinions here. And of course, I can jump in and out as I please, okay? So when we finish my little list, I got a short list. We'll keep it short tonight. But again, when we finish, if you have a question, you want these gentlemen to fire an answer off for you, give you an opinion on that, we'll open the floor to that, okay? So we're going to let you hold your questions to the end, if that makes sense. Okay? First subject I've got, and these are subjects. Being this time of year and coming up before next month, the subject is swarm management. How you would manage a colony to make it swarm, to keep it from swarming, and swarm control mechanisms. What methods can you use to control a hive from swarming? Or maybe you want it the other way, where you say, I want them to be strong enough to swarm. Subject, who wants to go first?
No.
I want to be strong enough to swarm, but I don't want them to swarm. Typically what I do for swarm management is when I find swarm cells, I will take the old queen out with a couple frames of bees and leave the swarm cells. I found cutting swarm cells, either I'm missing them or something, that doesn't work. You have to go back every 10 days. They can possibly swarm with a virgin queen, but I've had very little issues with them doing that. If it's got a lot of swarm cells and a real strong hive, I will take some of the swarm cells out and put in the queen castle also. So I make several small splits out of that hive.
I would first ask what your objective is. If it's to make honey, then you should manage your swarms. If it's just to pollinate your garden, then let them swarm and be bees, if you're not interested at all in honey. As far as managing them, I'm with Mike. You want as many bees in your colony as possible to maximize on honey production. So I try and avoid making spring splits. However, if they start raising queen cells, I will either remove the old queen or take a few frames out and leave the old queen and give the frames of bees and brood that are removed a purchased queen or queen cell. I intentionally get hives ready to swarm if I'm trying to rear queens with them. That's about the only time I'm going to do that.
Yes, I was just out looking today because I'm worried about all this warm weather we have, and we got another week of it or so before we get back to supposedly normal temperatures. And, you know, of course, there was no swarm cells in there, but I was looking anyway just to see if any of the bees had gone crazy. But yes, I haven't found any method. If they decide they're going to swarm, there's probably not much you can do about it, but I have done the same thing Mike talks about. If you see swarm cells in there, take them out, try to raise another bunch of bees with it, so raise another queen and stuff, but you know, that's about it. Again, like everybody said, you try to get as many bees as you can. It's a fine line between getting as many bees as you can to get honey and getting enough bees in there for them to go, we need to split and go somewhere else. So.
Yeah, why would you cut swarm cells out? That's a $25 queen in there. Every time you cut one out, you just threw $25 away.
For the beginners, a good indicator species on when the swarms will really be cranking is when the eastern red buds start to bloom. When you start seeing them, you will start seeing swarms, if not slightly before. And also, I forgot what else I was going to say. Probably wasn't important.
When is the eastern red bud?
The eastern red bud's fixing to bloom. It blooms dark purple flowers. That's the only common name I know for it. Cerces canadensis is the Latin name, if you're into that.
Okay, everybody said that? Thank you, gentlemen. Again, they made some good points, a little bit, I thought. There's a fine line. I like that description of a fine line, okay, because you try to get the colony as strong as you can to maximize honey production, but if you cross the line, they could hit the trees. And let's face it, if they hit the trees, you could have split those maybe, and packaged bees nowadays, $110. So basically what this flew away is $110. I know that bothers some people. But again, but it depends on which direction they fly into, because with bait hives out, like the program the other month about bait hives, that can be pretty beneficial from that standpoint, swarming. Beekeepers always get excited about swarming. It's a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, I don't know a beekeeper that doesn't really get excited when he hears about a swarm. I get less excited when it's one of my swarms. To say that's kind of be disappointing, to be honest. Thank you, gentlemen. Now,
One other thing, and I don't know, y'all may know, I was reading what makes them swarm. I heard a lot many years ago that they're overcrowded, they're, do this, but I heard something recently, and I can't remember what the numbers are. There's some kind of ratio between, if you get so much brood as compared to the bees in it or something, and I can't remember what those magic numbers are. But if you're interested, you've got the magic numbers?
I've got the magic numbers.
Never mind.
Okay, the magic number he's talking about. A colony tries to keep itself balanced. Okay, throughout the year, a colony really tries to keep itself balanced. So in the spring, when the queen's really cranking it out, and part of that's what's coming in the door. It's got to be a good source coming in the door. So you got a lot of fresh pollen coming in the door, you got a lot of fresh nectar coming in the door. Queen's been laying like everything. Okay, now, when the capped brood reaches 70% of the total population of adult bees in the hive, 70% of the adult population of the hive is now in capped brood. At that point, the bees think it's safe to swarm, we need to swarm. I think, and again, when research says that's the number one thing that wants to make it swarm, is that capped brood. Right.
And that was what I was going to add. The only tried and true method that I've ever heard of, and never tried it because it's too much management and manipulation, is the demarré method, where you remove that capped brood from the brood nest and put it in a super of honey or an empty super between them and reduce that brood pheromone in the brood nest with the queen down low. But like I said, I've never tried it, but supposedly it works, but that's a lot of management.
Question, what about adding more room?
Usually by the time they're that strong, adding room won't do it. They've already made their mind up to swarm. If you add the room soon enough, that will deter it to some degree, okay? Adding brood boxes to give her more room to lay, you got that congestion out of the brood box, that will help. It's not 100%, but it'll help. Spreading your frames out a little bit, okay? We dispersing that brood to a bigger area, when it's warm enough, not right now, too early. That can help also. It leaves that congestion in the brood box down some. But again, nothing's 100% on this. I remember years ago, Bryan would enjoy this, there was a theory that you could take that hive body and turn it upside down, even after it has queen cells. It's got queen cells in it. Turn it upside down, leave it for 24 hours, turn it upside down on the hive. Okay, what would happen? Well, I've tried that, believe it or not. Several of us tried that. Just say, hey, try it, what happens? What I saw happen, the queen cells that were already capped, those queens were killed. Okay, in other words, they fell backwards into the cell, and it killed those queens. So it delayed swarming. Did it stop swarming? Nope. Again, you turn your box back over, and they just started again. So it didn't stop it, it just delayed it for a little bit, is my experience with that. But anyway, that's a little different theory. Okay, that kind of leads us into what Bryan was talking about as far as moving frames. That leads me into my next discussion point, which is splits. A lot of people like to say, I'm going to split in the spring. Again, that's the age-old fine line debate. Do you split, which is really a controlled swarm, get right down to it, or do you make them get stronger and take the chance of swarming? What's some of the ways you can split them? There's multiple ways you can split bees. I always tell people you can always split bees, you can always unite bees, combine bees. But talk about splitting, some of the options you have on splitting, the timing on splitting, and just physically, what frames would you move, what you're looking for on a split, and some of the different options you have. Who wants to go first?
Splitting, you take some of the bees and put one thing and some of the bees and put in another. I've heard all kind of things that you take one frame of the uncapped brood, one frame of honey, one frame of pollen, an empty pulled frame, and maybe one frame of foundation if you're in a five frame nuke or something. And then the big thing that I've heard all the time is feed the hound out of them after you do that split and stuff, because they're going to need to build up pretty quick. So do that. As far as when you split, I don't intentionally try to split because I'm mainly trying to get honey. So I don't intentionally split anything until after the honey flow stuff. But if I see some queen cells and things, I'll do that just to keep them from splitting themselves and me losing them and things. But I don't have any specific technique. I don't have a specific kind of frames I put anywhere like that.
I don't either. I usually do most of the splits, like I said, with the swarm cells, but the easiest way to do it, Bob went over this in class this week for those who are in the beginner class, it's going to be a repeat. But the Doolittle method is the easiest way. You go through and take all your open brood out, shake all the bees off, put them in a separate hive body, put it back on top of the hive body, just came off over the queen excluder between it. So now you know your queen's in the bottom. Well, overnight, the nurse bees will come up with that open brood, You take that box off then and set it right there, because those are young bees. They haven't flown yet, so you don't need to move it away. And then introduce a queen to it, and they're gonna take that queen a whole lot easier, because those are young bees. They're gonna take a queen a lot better than the older forager bees. That's one of the easiest ways to make a split.
How much time we got? All right, so splitting, there's 101 ways to do it for sure. So my splitting starts with bee math, okay? Our flow is just getting ready to start here. And I try and maximize on honey as well, not to say, and I don't like making spring splits, which a lot of beekeepers will tell you to split your bees in the spring, but as we've all three agreed on, if you split your bees in the spring, you're going to reduce your honey production, but it's better than letting your bees swarm in some cases, hence harvesting the queen cells and letting them raise queens. But I really start managing, and a little bit more on swarm management, so I start managing my swarms and getting ready for splits around Christmas, because I start feeding pollen to get my bees ready and full of brood around this time of year, so they're ready to make a lot of honey. Obviously I have strong hives and I have weak hives, so right now what I'm doing is equalizing my bees, whether I'm taking brood from strong hives and putting it into weaker hives, emerging brood to immediately get more bees in there. So that's helping me, or I sometimes switch hive locations in the same bee yard. You're taught in your beginner class to move bees 2 feet or 2 miles. Well, if in the middle of a nice foraging day, if you have a weak hive over here and a strong hive over there, and you go out there and switch their locations, then all the foragers from that strong hive are going to come back to the weak hive. So I do all these things to reduce my need to split my bees pre-flow. And then I prefer to split my bees post-flow after the honey crop somewhat, and that's where your bee math comes into play, because you know our flow around here ends towards the end of June. You know it takes around 40 to 50 days for a worker bee to forage on honey. So I'll count back from the end of our flow about 40 days and start making my splits then, because those open larvae that I take from that hive then will have never made me honey anyways. Thus, I haven't reduced my honey production that much, and my split will still be able to forage some on that flow. It has 40 days of flow left. I hope I didn't confuse you too much.
Something about 40 days.
Everybody figured it? I think that was a good discussion. And I like bee math. You gotta know bee math. That's always important. And that takes advantage of as many things you can at one time, okay? I will give you this caution. If you got a full-time job, okay? Todd, I'm looking at you. Gotta pick on somebody. Todd's got a full-time job. So during the day, midday, when his bees gonna be swarming, he ain't there. He doesn't know it. So if you don't go into your bees pretty often and don't see cells, queen cells, you don't know if they swarmed or not. So sometimes, like Ryan says, that splitting can be a management deal to save you bees, other than hitting the air. Especially you gotta say, how much time do I have? How often can I go in a hive? How much can I look? Do I know what I'm looking for? And that can make some of this decision about whether or not to split, especially in springtime. But honey production can seriously be impacted by spring splits. Yeah, swarming can too. Swarming colony, how much honey do they make usually? 1 super, maybe? Maybe if you're lucky. If you're lucky, yeah. Otherwise, that colony would have made 6 or 7 supers, maybe.
Are we going to ask questions?
Yes, in a little bit. Hold your question.
I want to ask on this subject.
Okay, you get it. We'll get there. Okay, I'd like to answer too about the Doolittle splits. Those really work good, really work good. And they have worked good, as a matter of fact, since the 1880s, by the way. Okay, Doolittle is not because you're doing little, it's because that's the guy that started doing it. His last name was Doolittle in the 1880s. So that's been around a while. That's not new technology. The internet didn't invent that one, okay? Now, next topic for them to discuss is requeening. Requeening. When's the best time to requeen? How would you requeen? Why would you requeen? Who wants it first?
I want a young queen going into the flow, so I requeen lots of my hives in the fall. And that said, the first hives I split are the ones that aren't meeting par in the spring. That hive, all my other hives in that yard have honey supers on them. I will get queens in the spring and requeen the ones that don't, and split them up. So I try to in the fall, but I will at any time. Anytime you see have a failing colony, start with requeening. But I try to requeen my production colonies in the fall.
I don't do a lot of requeening, but I agree with Bryan, requeen them in the fall, because those queens you get in the fall were emerged after the summer solstice, is that the right word? Yes. And they're gonna be better winter queens. I mean, the bees know that, and I would requeen in the fall too if I was going to.
Same thing, I usually requeen in the fall. The only time that I would requeen is if I see something wrong, the queen's failing for some reason, not laying eggs, start laying drone brood all the time or something, then I'd just go ahead and replace her, or just combine that hive with another one if I could. But, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you need to requeen in the spring or summer, you can go get one of those queens and you queen cast them out of those swarm cells that we're talking about.
And to requeen, I will remove the queen 24 hours before I put the new queen in, pull the cork, stick her in there, and come back a week later. That's all I do. I will use a medicine spacer if I have them. If not, then I just stick them in there between the frames.
So you just free release them?
No, I pull the cork on the candy end and let them eat through the candy. I don't free release queens typically.
Okay, everybody's agreeing with that? Okay, seems to be a whole lot of agreement there about fall requeening. I will differ on one point there a little bit. The method of requeen. Strong colony, okay? Now, we're not talking about a dud, something that Todd would have. We're talking about a real colony, okay? Really blowing over. And all of a sudden you see, whoa, we got a problem here. And you think, well, I need to be requeening it. Strong colony is not as easy to requeen as a weak colony. Weak colony is more or less like an observation hive. You can do anything. I mean, it's hard to make a mistake, get right down to it. There's so few bees, they know that. They don't have many options. And so they'll let you manipulate queens a lot better. Strong colony doesn't think that way. My experience has been, if you go in there ahead of time, a day ahead, and you say, I'm looking for queens. And I pull queens, so there she is, smash. Because I know I've got another queen in the mail to be in the morning, right? So I'll come back 24 hours later, put queen cages in. I'm looking for queens, and I'm smashing queens, okay? Here's what my experience has been. That little weak dud, you can get by with that. Strong colony will say, overnight, what would they do? They start pulling out cells. Yeah, they start pulling out cells. Now, when I go back in there, if I see any cells started, which there will be, if I cut them out and introduce my queen cage, again, with the candy in, the cork out of the candy in, which is going to be, again, slow release, which is 2 or 3 days, usually, that works pretty good. But if you don't cut cells out at that point, the cells they have started, they always will take precedence over that versus their queen you put in there, they don't know. Even years ago, I don't remember what year it was now, it was in the 80s, sometime or another, Dr. John Ambrose had a little experiment going about some different races of bees, okay? And so he had different beekeepers, 2 yards in the mountains, 2 in the Piedmont, 2 at the coast. Again, I don't remember how many colonies was involved in the whole thing. It was like 50 in each yard. But anyway, the idea was going to requeen with identical queens. And at that time, we was worried about trachea mites. And so they're going to check for trachea mites. So every so often, we had to take samples of bees, send them to Raleigh for the guys to count trachea mites. Well, again, they gave us a set regimen, because this is a scientific experiment. They give us a set regimen of how to requeen. They sent us to queens, okay? We had no control over that. They sent us to queens. Well, everybody followed the regimen that the paper said, which was go in there, find your queen, kill her, wait 24 hours, introduce the queen cage into the colony. Let them release her. Okay, that's what we did. our queen acceptance was terrible. I mean, it was like 40%, best I remember. It was terrible. A lot of those colonies already had queen cells, and if you'd have waited a little bit longer, you wouldn't have known the difference. Because what would have happened, you'd have seen a queen in there, maybe starting to lay again, but it wasn't the queen source that we gave them. It was their own queen, more or less what they did in emergency queen. That was a bust. That kind of surprised Ambrose, to be honest. And so, of course, all the beekeepers going, well, we knew that. And so, let's requeen at the same time. Find that queen, throw her out, put that queen cage in there at the same time. And we did that, and the success was way up in the 90s. It worked amazingly good, but there was a difference. Strong colony cannot stand that 24 hours. That's way too long. So I differ a little bit on that subject, so it's an interesting subject. Okay? Y'all good on queens? Okay? What's the difference between a good queen and a bad queen? What makes the difference between a good queen and a bad queen? Anybody want to touch that one?
Nutrition.
I like that answer. Nutrition. How that queen was raised, how much she was fed when she was being raised makes a difference between a good queen and a bad queen. Like a swarm queen. Yeah, exactly. Good queens.
There's some kind of thing that they talk about the length of the abdomen compared with the length of the whole thing. The longer, the fatter the abdomen, the more developed the ovaries are, the more eggs she's got inside. That's supposedly a good indication too.
Yeah, and I think that's a good indication usually. Yeah. The guys down in Florida refer to them, I know Brian's heard this expression before, gator tails. They like to see the gator tail queens, which are really long abdomen queens, okay? Have a tendency to be better queens. Okay, the last subject before we open it up for y'all to ask questions. Okay, if there was one point of beekeeper error that happens to you, what you see happens to other people, is people call you and ask you questions, what would you think the number one problem that beekeepers have? What's the number one error we have?
Not keeping up with the varroa mites. That's the number one. People call and they ask questions. They'll have a weak hive, it'll die out, we'll go through nutrition, all that. It finally gets down to it. I said, well, what'd you do for mite control last fall? I didn't have any mites. You got to stay on top of the varroa mites. That's the biggest problem.
If you're waiting to fall to treat your mites, you're waiting too late. Mites, most definitely, and the internet is terrible.
Yep, I've heard several people say, they want to wait till like December and treat with the oxalic acid because they're broodless in. Well, you waited too, like Brian said, you waited too late then and said, oh, I killed all the mites. Yeah, you killed the mites, but the viruses they vector are already there. You waited too late. That's the problem's already happened. All you doing is killing the carrier, not the problem.
And also, when you treat for mites, make sure you check after that. I know it's a pain. I've grumbled about it, so sometimes I don't do it and things. But just because you treated, that doesn't mean it worked. I've done the same kind of treatments for the last few years and stuff, and then all of a sudden I started checking them more regularly, and I'd find a hive or two that instead of knocking them back, the numbers were still up. And I went, I don't know why this hive didn't work, but I've got to treat it again. So treat them, and then check and make sure it worked.
Yeah, just like he said, if you're not, you have to check to see what your mite load is, and then treat, and then check again to see if it worked. I had that instance of a couple hives this year. I treated, went back and rechecked, and the mite count was higher than it was before I treated, so I treated again with a different chemical. So, don't keep using the same chemical over and over too. There's 3 or 4 good ones out there. Keep changing it up. Use a different one every year.
One thing I've got, and it's confusing with the literature, I think, or something. Let's say you've got a bunch of hives in your yard out there, maybe 8, 10, something like that, and you find only 2 of them have a mite count of over 5. 5 is what a lot of people use, at least in the early summer and stuff. If it's over a count of 5 per 100 bees or something that you treat, well, do you treat just those 1 or 2 hives that are big, that have the high mite counts, or do you treat them all? Because I've also heard that, you have these mite bombs or something. Now I've driven the mites out of those couple of hives that I treated, and now they just went to the other hive. So I treat all my hives, but what do you say?
Yeah, I agree too. If I go through and check all my hives, if I get to the point I've checked, say I've got 10 hives in the yard and I've checked 3 and their mite count's all high, just well treat them all. There's no need to, treat just those three or whatever, just treat everything.
I believe that you can keep bees successfully without using miticides, but it takes an incredible amount of work. That said, I do not think you can get successful mite treatments with miticides at only 2 times a year. You have to stay ahead of them. If my bees get 5% mites, I'm in trouble. I'm maintaining less than 3. I changed my miticide practices 3 years ago and I'm maintaining less than 10% losses for the past 3 years. So I have to say there's a correlation between the two.
A lot of people have trouble with the chemicals. They say, I want to be a natural beekeeper, which the person I talked to the other day lost their bees. That's what they want to do. I want to be a natural beekeeper, which that's fine. I know we've got a few in here, but I'm sure the natural beekeepers are doing something. They're not just sitting in the house watching TV, hoping the bees take care of the mites. They're out there doing some kind of breaking brood cycle, doing something to treat the mites, not just nothing.
Do you mind telling us what you do? Do you rely on like doing splits or taking the queen out to reduce the amount of captive brood? How do you do your mite control?
So I want to, who in here grows a garden? You go out there and just throw some seeds in the ground and expect an abundant crop, or do you start working that thing in the fall? So I start with my mite treatments the fall before the flow. I just started pulling them off about a week. Well, I put them on in December and pulled them off a couple weeks ago. So I'm going into the flow with mite-free bees. And then towards the end of the flow, I have an advantage because I rear queens. So right when we're still in a good flow, I can go through and put a queen cell in about 3 supers up on a hive with supers on it. And that virgin queen is going to go down there and kill that old queen. So I also create a broodless period. And as soon as that queen mates, I can treat those bees during that broodless period and get almost 100% mite control in midsummer, even though most normal colonies are boiling over with brood. If I don't achieve broodless colonies with that, I can go in there and remove some brood and make those summer splits and put one of my queens in, and they will too take off. And then I treat my bees again, and that's around July when that happens. And I'll start looking again August, September, and treat again going into fall if need be. I never use antibiotics unless I have European foul brood, ever.
I agree on the antibiotics.
Nor do I treat for nosema.
Me either, but don't tell Bob.
I don't use antibiotics either. My wife's a nurse and she's real big on antibiotic resistance and stuff, so I figure the bees have the same problem.
Very good, good discussion. I kept hearing over and over, seemed like a theme of queen management. There's kind of a theme of queen management going on here. So maybe we need to think about managing our queens a little bit more to have stronger colonies. Now, I did write down my answer to that earlier. What's the number one problem I see in beekeeping? It's actually what I would term procrastination. Okay? You put things off. That old queen, she was good for last month. Surely she's good for another month. The old girl, she didn't do that. Well, maybe, maybe not. There's a point where that's not true, okay? Or, wow, Todd's ready to go fishing. It's a nice pretty day. He's heard the fish are biting. Water temperature is 58 degrees. And so all of a sudden he says, I'll do that hive tomorrow. And that tomorrow catches up with you. And so I think procrastination is a real big problem for beekeepers. Remember, our bees don't wait on us. Okay, if they wait on us, they'd be pretty sad. That's why all of a sudden you see your swarm hanging up the tree. They didn't wait for you to come do management on them. They did their own management. So the bees are not going to wait on us. Putting supers on time. Are the bees going to wait on us? Nope.
Anticipation and action are the 2 things that I attribute my success in beekeeping to.
Sounds good, Brian. I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, we're going to open the floor. Who's got a question?
I got a question. I read an article
in bee culture, written by, I think a guy named Irwin, and it was subject to Pandora's box, and it related to the migration of the African bees. And they've been found in Tennessee, South Carolina, and have been in North Carolina.
Sure.
So my question is, what does the backyard beekeeper, like most of us are, what does it look like when they arrive in our area?
Okay, Bryan has worked African bees before, Africanized bees. I have not. I've talked to different people that have, of course, but I have not personally worked on myself. I do know there's a smaller cell size, so you can measure the cell size that the bees themselves construct, and that's a good indication whether or not they're Africanized. I do know there's been several Africanized colonies confirmed in North Carolina. You got to ask yourself, how far away are they? I'm tell you how far away they are. They're overnight. You got an open rail car coming across the Mexican border, or South Texas even, okay? Goes in through New Orleans. The next morning or next day it's here, okay? It's stopped in Kannapolis somewhere. And so again, that swarm that may be in that rail car, open door rail car, I mean, it can move hundreds of miles just overnight. Is that a big problem for us? I don't know, so no it is. I think the biggest defense we have against the Africanized bees is the fact that we're beekeepers and we manage our bees. We know the queens, we know the behavior of that hive. And so if it's getting a little hot, and just because it's got a hot hive does not mean it's Africanized, by the way. I've seen some very aggressive hives. I mean, very aggressive. And they weren't Africanized. They're inbred multiple generations, and they got really hot. But anyway, there's ways you can deal with that. But the simplest way we're going to feed them is requeening. We're going to raise our own queens locally here, and then we're going to requeen our colonies. We're going to keep docile stock from requeening our own colonies. I think that's the real answer for defeating the Africanized bees. Will we totally defeat them? No, that's the answer to that. They're here. Their genes are here. We're not going to defeat their genes. And some of their genes are good. Some of them ain't as good. Yeah, they're a little hotter. But they do have some good traits too. So that's kind of the old good with the bad type situation. I'm not terribly fearful. And the only sad thing for me is I'm getting older. And they ain't really showed up in big numbers to make the paper and the news media. Okay? Because when they start making the papers and the news media, Bob is putting some orange caution lights on his truck. Right? And I'm going to give me some Ghostbusters music to play, right? I'm going to let Hunter wear a veil as we go down the road. But other depends, right?
Well, North Carolina put on this born and bred workshop about raising and breeding local honeybees twice within the past 10 years. Fortunately enough, I was able to be a part of both events. And the main purpose of that program is that the scientists believe that we are above the threshold at which Africanized honeybees can survive as a pure strain of bee. Granted, lots of the bees coming from South California and South Texas are likely to have some of that AHP genetic in them, but those also may be some good qualities, like Bob said. And as he also said, I've worked Africanized bees and they're not that bad. And they don't have mites. So we could just have omitted that entire mite conversation if we had Africanized bees.
Really? I don't know nothing about Africanized bees.
You're asking what's it going to look like here or something. First off, from what I can tell, you can't just look at your bees until they're Africanized. When they talk about sending bees off, the state people talk about sending them off to labs, they've got a ratio of how big to how wide their wings are. They look for things like that, and we're obviously not going to be able to do that. But if you got a problem, tell one of the local aviary inspectors. He'll come out. If he thinks it's a problem, then they'll send it off and they'll start measuring wings on these people, on these bees. But then again, like you said, the thing about being local beekeepers and stuff, all of us are the first line of defense against this Africanized things, because we know at least what to look for, and we know when to call for help. So people, you know, I've heard all these things about people outlawing people keeping bees in their neighborhoods or in their cities or stuff. They're just working against it. They're worried about Africanized bees. They're working against themselves, because if they ever get anybody in, get any Africanized bees in there, nobody's gonna know for a while, until some kid gets stung and almost dies or something like that. So,
That's a very good point. The prime example of that, go back and do the research. A few years ago, Tampa, Florida says, we got a problem, too many bees in the city. We're getting complaints because we got vacant lots, and then we got commercial beekeepers bringing in 2 or 3 tractor trailer loads of bees to sit down on a vacant lot. They're just trying to, shall we say, buy time before they went to California. But people were complaining, there was a nuisance standpoint, there's so many bees. So of course their city council, being the great wise dominant feature they were, they said, no bees in Tampa, outlaw. Okay, and so any existing beekeepers in Tampa had to move their bees outside the city limits. Okay, beekeepers were not happy about that. Now, when the little old lady down the road calls me and says, swarm bees hanging out in the bush in my front yard. There's kids in this neighborhood, come get them. You hear it all the time. And of course, my answer always is, you want me to come get the kids, you come get the bees. You know, it's always debatable. But anyway, and we go, don't we? We go. We go get the bees. Keeps them from being a problem to what people perceive as a problem in the neighborhoods. Okay, but city governments are not set up to handle those kind of calls. They don't have beekeepers on staff. And then their budgets they think are tight, and so they don't want beekeepers. So they want the assistance of us. Well, in Tampa, when the little old lady called, said, not me, I ain't going. Can't keep bees in Tampa. You need to call City Hall. So now they call City Hall. Hey, there's bees out in this bush. You got to do something. Well, who are they going to send? They don't have nobody to send. And so they started having more and more problems with bees. And oddly enough, what bees started showing up in Tampa? Africanized bees. So now they've started having bees in backyard gas grills, water meters, these unusual type places, more so than normal. There's nobody really to manage the situation. The beekeepers say, fine, Tampa, handle the problem yourself. And put Tampa in a real bind. So from that example, other cities have said, well, what do we do? North Carolina has recently passed, the state legislators passed a law saying a local government, meaning a city, cannot restrict beekeeping in their city limits. You can be allowed to keep bees in your backyard. Now there's a point in there, you know what I mean? If Bryan had a half-acre city lot and had 50 hives in the backyard.
Oh, I do.
Neighbors may say, Bryan, you crossed the edge here somewhere. And again, that's that fine line. There's a line somewhere. But you still want to be a good neighbor. Good management of your bees, when you work your bees can make a difference. North Carolina does have an Africanized bee plan, okay, Department of Agriculture. That was been out years ago now. I happen to have a copy if you want to read it one day. There is a set in writing plan of what to do, okay? And so, yeah, it involves beekeepers, it involves a lot of people. That thing's been looked at 2 or 3 times, I think revised a little bit along. But it was put together by the Department of Agriculture along with the North Carolina State beekeepers. So don't think beekeepers didn't have an impact and influence on that document. But there is an Africanized bee plan for North Carolina. Wilmington, they've had them up at Ports of Wilmington for years. Bait hives, again, Mike's bait hives, they got them all over the place. And they tell them guys, keep an eye out. When you see bees in the bait hive, tell us. Okay, when they've had that case, they've had bees in the bait hive. So what do? They take down the bait hive and destroy the bees. They don't take that chance. They don't take that chance. Because the case we know for sure of Africanized bees coming to North Carolina was down at Wilmington, and there was a containerized ship hauling some pipe material out of South America. And those bees were in some pipe joints and then showed up at the port. They were tested, and the Beltsville, Maryland test showed that they were Africanized bees. But those bees were destroyed. So the guys at the ports pretty well know to keep an eye out for that. That's our best defense on the ports. But how about the rail yard in Kannapolis? Ooh. How close you got to breeding nukes to the rail yard?
3 miles or so.
Yeah, see? So I don't think our problem is going to be the ports myself. That's been covered. Trucks, trains, how about beekeepers? Ooh, okay. So here we go. We got Giles. He's got his camping trailer. Giles, I'm picking on you now, okay? And he's down there in South Florida somewhere, vacationing for a couple of days, catching fish, eating oranges, whatever else he does in South Florida, okay? And all of a sudden, wow, that's a swarm of bees hanging right there in that bush. He said, if I just had me a cardboard box, I'd put those bees in that cardboard box, punch me a couple of pocket knife holes in there, tape them, duct tape them shut, throw them in the back of that camper, and I'd haul them home and put them in a hive. They need a home. Can that happen? Absolutely. And so again, in a day's time, when he drives from South Florida to Miami Church Road, ooh, now guess what? You could have Africanized bees set up. So again, beekeepers, we kind of our own worst problem in that kind of situation. And don't think beekeepers don't move bees around. Don't even begin to think that, okay? It's not just the commercial guys, hobbyists do it all the time. We did a quarantine for the trachea mite back in the mid, 80s, 86, 87, I think it was. That was the most useless quarantine I ever seen. Because why? You can put a sign up at the state line. No trachea mites allowed. State law. They don't read, bees don't leave. Bees move with beekeepers, things move. So that didn't work for darn. We had experience with that. Anyway, does that cover the question, Africanized bees? Yes?
Okay, back to the swarming conversation.
Okay.
Premise is you're a hobbyist. You want to restrict, you don't want 4,000 hives in your backyard.
Okay.
Spread them all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the downside to just letting the swarm leave?
Okay.
I mean, other than you might get less honey out of that hive.
Okay. The downside I see is the fact those bees now that you did not provide space for, or a hive, bait hive for them to go into, or some swarm management, now they're loose in your neighborhood, okay? Now, are they hunting for small children to harass? No. Small children are looking for them to harass them, but it's not the other way around. Okay, but so what happens? Now, how about that hole in your neighbor's house? Up there at the top of the eave. Ooh. And behind that hole, there's a cavity. And I've been amazed, especially in newer houses, how many holes are in new houses. Go up in the attic of a new house. Look how much daylight you can see. Gee, that's an open invitation. You might as well hang a sign out there, bees here, please come. So again, it's the neighborhood perception of that and the nuisance factor of trying to get them out of the house. So much easier to control them before they move into that permanent location, which is your neighbor's house. That's how I see it. Boys, you got another comment? Okay.
Yeah, put a couple bait hives up and call another beekeeper to come get the bees. And no guarantee they're gonna go in the bait hive, but a lot better chance than if you don't have a bait hive. And I'm sure somebody would like to have them if you don't want them.
That's the downside to someone else. What's the downside to your hive?
If your hive swarms,
Yeah, half your hive leaves, half's still there, there's gonna flow, you got some honey, maybe you won't get the maximum amount, but if you can get those out of the swarm bees somewhere else, put on a swarm box and take it somewhere else, what's wrong with just letting that hive leave, half the hive leave and let the other one go out again?
in my mind, that's what bees are supposed to do. That's what they've been bred to do for a billion years. So that's the natural thing. Like I said, the only thing you don't want to upset your neighbors because your bees are loose in their yard or something, things like that. But like somebody, like Mike just mentioned and stuff, you know, if you think you're getting too many bees in your hive and you're worried about it, call somebody in here and we'll be glad to come get your bees for you and stuff. But as far as, you know, is it naturally bad for the bees? No, that's what they do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's what bees have been doing for millions of years before any of us got involved with them. And that is one method of mite control. You're going to have a natural break in the brood cycle there, so that will help some with mites. It's not going to eliminate them, but it will help.
correct that you lose 65% of the working bees when they swarm?
Well, yeah, I do have knowledge in it.
So, my last minute addition to that conversation is, the fact is, if you let your bees swarm, then you mentioned, you make some honey. I think if your bees swarm, oftentimes you make no honey on that hive, and what little bit of honey those bees have made, they consume, because it's still, oftentimes you can't tell a strong hive to swarm. There's still a ton of bees in there. So I feel like you're lucky to make honey on a hive that has swarmed. But to answer your question, I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with letting your bees swarm if you aren't trying to get honey off your bees. It breaks the brood cycle and replaces the queen. She probably mated with some bees that are doing fairly well nearby. If they're strong enough to swarm in the spring, pre-flow. The bees are smart. They typically swarm. Typically, a reproduction swarm will happen on the onset of the flow on the really good hives. You don't want one of them late season swarms. So, and you can always split your bees. In North Carolina, you can sell 10 colonies without being inspected legally. And as everyone in this room knows, beekeeping is not cheap. So you can get a little return on your investment just selling a few frames of brood and a queen.
Very good point. You can always sell a nuke. Bees actually sell by the frame of bees. Commercial guys do that a whole lot, get right down to it. So again, you got other options. Just quiz around, you got multiple options. I will kind of address the point a little bit. I mentioned a minute ago, queen management. Gentlemen, the three of you, did any of y'all mark your queens?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I try to. I understand that. There's a point where you say, whoa, what happened there? If you don't mark your queens, how do you know it's the same queen? You don't.
That's why I'm marking that.
Yeah, you don't. Now you go in there and all of a sudden you say, well, that's the queen. And she's not marked. Something's happened. Sometime this spring, guess what happened? They swarmed. Mike was at work. They missed his bait hive. They went down the road. His neighbor called me. Okay? And so, have I put up swarms before? And I'll even take a show of hands on this. How many of us have put up swarms that then when we went back and looked at that swarm a day or two later, in the hive, we had a marked queen? 1, 2, 3. See, I got a couple here, yeah. So don't think marked queens won't swarm. Okay? But how's that beekeeper know if it's not marked? So again, queen management here a little bit kind of plays in. I think queen marking is kind of nice. Okay? Other questions? We got another question. Yes, Tom.
When you're going to requeen, talking about killing the queens, is it better to take her completely out and you keep her for a backup and just make them queenless, or is it better to pinch her and put her back in so they know immediately that she's dead and they can do something?
Okay. Gentlemen, you want to hit that discussion?
I've never killed a queen intentionally. I always put them in a nuke or something like that to make sure I've got a queen in there, laying and stuff. So I keep them and stuff. So I haven't heard anything about whether it's best to put the dead queen in there so they realize it. I think they're going to realize it whether the dead body's in there or not.
Yeah, they don't have to see her to know she's not there. I mean, they're not looking for a dead body. They know she's gone.
I don't hold on to old queens. If I'm requeening them, typically there's a problem. I rip her head off and throw her on the ground. She becomes animal.
I kind of like that answer, Brian, because that's what I do pretty well. I'll just, again, if I've got queens in my pocket, now, queens in my pocket, there's a difference. I'll just pick her up and smash her and throw her to the one side and keep on going. You can throw her in the hive if you want to. I know some old guys used to say throw her in the hive, and then they have a nice, funeral for the queen, and they get out in the carriages and everything. No, that's not how it happens. That's not how it happens. So the bees don't have to see her. I'm like y'all. It's the pheromones that does it, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, if I've got queens coming in the mail, and I'm out working a day or two ahead of time finding queens, because that can be a little dicey sometimes. That one colony that really needs to be requeened, and all of a sudden you're having a hard time finding that queen. So it's nice to work out a little bit ahead of time. So what's Bob doing that? I cheat. Hey, I'm not above cheating. I've got some little hairpin cages, okay? And so I go in there and I say, well, there she is. I pick her up nice and gentle like, just like I always would do. And I run her in that hairpin cage, okay? I put the end in it, I set it right on top of the frames, right between two frames. You know, they don't go down in there, so I gotta cheat the space a little bit. So I put a spacer ring on. Now, immediately, you'll see bees come to her and start feeding her. She's in a cage. They know that's their queen. Don't think they don't. And they'll feed her in that cage, okay? That's bought me some time. That has bought me some time. So now my queens do come, I got the new queen in my pocket. I go over and I pull that cage out, say, yep, there she is. I put that cage in my other pocket, take my new queen, cork out, set her down, keep on going. Okay, that way there's no lag in the bees thinking they didn't have a queen. How long can you go that way? That's a big old debate sometimes. How long can you keep that colony queenless if you got a queen caged in there? My experience has been about a month. I've gone a month. And the bees did not try to replace her. She was in a cage. Now, would that happen every time? I don't think so. But again, I've had it happen, be a month. So you can't keep them caged a long time, especially you got a good colony feeding. Okay, that's the point.
So if you're keeping her in a cage, you're taking her out, putting the new one back in, you don't have any delay there.
That's right. That's what I'm after, is no delay. No delay in pheromones where the bees think they don't have a queen. The new queen, they know she's a queen, and they'll feed her through that screen, just like she's a queen. Of course, if they could get to her, they'd kill her, because she's not their queen at that point. But they know there's a queen there, and that does make a difference, I think, yes. Okay, we got that question? Yes.
What do you think about the heat treatment for varroa mites? They've talked about.
Okay, heat treatment. We can expose the varroa mites to extreme heat.
I personally think there's a lot of extreme heat in Central America and Florida and things like that. They haven't seen anything with that heat treatment work, and I don't know. I'm very leery of whether that, I've got to at least see a lot more studies on whether that works or not. I think it's kind of fishy right now.
See, and I've read just a little bit on that. I don't know a whole lot. I may be way off base here, but I think most of that they have a frame in there that's drone brood, and what it's doing is heating that frame and killing the mites that are in that frame with the drone brood, which is the same thing as, you know, the green plastic ones you take out and put in the freezer. So all you're doing is killing the mites that are in that one frame, I think. I may be wrong. From what I've read, that's the way I understand it.
I stick with stuff I know works, which is not heat. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, if that's the case, that's just like the drone frames, you know, if you put those in there for mite treatment, forget about it, like Bob was talking about, time and procrastination, and you leave that in and let a bunch of drones hatch out. Now you got bees in your mite hive.
In fact, the one study I saw about that, and said it wasn't an official study, that people, in fact, it was an advertisement for it. They were talking about how it worked. And right below that was an advertisement for a flow hive. So,
Yeah, you got to understand, just because you see an ad or even read an article, that doesn't mean it's going to happen that way every time. Okay, it just won't necessarily be true. So it takes time. The example I use for you, and these boys up here probably remember, again, it's back in the 80s. There was an outfit that said, we have come up with a device, a battery-driven device, that you can turn this bad boy on and snap it to the outside of your pocket. It looked like a cell phone. That was before the days of cell phones, but anyway, it looked like a modern-day flip phone, what it looked like. Snap it in your pocket, you could work your bees without smoke. That thing put off some kind of ultra something sound, okay, and this sound then would calm the bees. And it would calm the bees to the point you needed no smoke, you could work your bees. When you got finished the bee job, you just turn the little device off. Hey, good to go. Man, them things were selling like hotcakes. I mean, they were selling. I saw vendors selling them at the state bee meetings. I saw people trying to use them. I'm going, exactly how's that work? Well, oddly enough, an old friend, John Ambrose again, Dr. Ambrose, he kind of scratches his head a little bit, and being a scientist, what scientists want to do? I want to experiment. I want to see how it works, see if it works. So they put up a little test experiment on several different bee yards to see how it worked. And basically what they found out, real short order, it don't work. Okay? That little weak hive, that during the main flow, that you could go over any time, anyway, and do about anything you wanted to, because it's a weak colony, it's during the flow, good weather was good, ideal conditions. Well, maybe you could get by. Okay, hey, it works. Now that full-size colony, with being a little foggy, overcast day, and the day before it rains or washes nectar out, and part of what the bees are working were buckwheat, and it's the mid-afternoon now. Oh, gee, guess what? The little device, them boys are over there patting that thing. Come on, come on. Bees are eating them up. What they found out, the experiment itself, what it found out, the inventors and guys that actually made that device, there is a frequency that will help calm bees. But they missed that frequency on that device by 1 decimal point. Well, guess what? 1 decimal point can be a big difference. And so it was a bust. So as soon as the research paper came out and the word got out that thing's crazy, it's off by 1 decimal point, doesn't work. Guess what the sales did? Can you find them now? Can you go over to Dandelion and buy one right now? No. Because the market quit, that was it. So you do see things, fad things, flow highs, my prime example too. I don't know. There's a bunch of I don't knows on that one. Okay? The theory behind that sounds pretty good. The theory sounds pretty good, but in practice, I don't, it's a little difference. Any more questions?
Drone congregation areas, how far out from your hive are they, and anything about drone?
I like that question. I know a little bit about that.
I don't know Brian's queen breed, we're letting him answer that.
So I try and set my drone congregation areas up about 3/4 of a mile away from my mating nukes. Between 3/4 of a mile and a mile, because I'm aware that to avoid inbreeding, the drones from a colony will fly less than 60 or so feet, will fly above 60 or so feet in their tornado type cyclone, that's the word I'm looking for, up through the air. They stay within a half mile of the parent colony. So when a virgin queen flies out of that colony, she flies for approximately 3/4 of a mile or so, at least a half a mile below 60 feet, and then starts to ramp up in the air in altitude to find one of those cyclones of drones. So if the science behind it is correct, then you want to be right around 3/4 of a mile to a mile.
Does like the different hives collect? Or
Yes,
they're
the different hives go to the same location year after year. That is one thing about beekeeping that science can't prove, because typically drones do not overwinter, but they can prove that drones from that same colony go to the same place year after year. Typically a tree line or a hedgerow, edge of a field, something along those lines is where they'll congregate at.
And the age-old question there is, how do they know?
Right.
They haven't been able to answer how they know, but they've proven time and time again, those drones were not alive,
and they
last
mate
year.
with a queen from their hive?
That's how they avoid mating, inbreeding with their mother.
Have you seen the drone?
No, I haven't, but what you can do, I would encourage you to get a virgin queen and some helium balloons at your field day and let her go up in there, and you may can observe that possibly over in the cemetery across the way there. It seems like it would be prime drone congregation areas.
Did you say you set up a congregation area for the?
If you're trying to, raising queens is easy. If you're trying to breed them, then yes, you need to saturate drone congregation areas. If you're trying to change the genetic makeup of your honeybees, yes, I do that. I have 3 different locations around 3/4 of a mile to a mile of my mating yard.
Now Brian's raising queens, this is not just for, the hive or 2 in the backyard, he's commercially producing queens.
Very good. David, to kind of touch on your question a little bit, you don't have to create drone concentration areas. Bees do that themselves. Okay, you have no influence on that. You got influence where you may put strong colonies, and And those drones will find their own drone concentration areas. And there'll be drones from multiple different colonies in that same area, okay? And there may be several different drone concentration areas in a given area, just not one, okay? That can be multiple ones. I will give you a little experiment you can try, and I've, of course, tried it. I try a lot of things. Most of them don't work. You know what a kite is? When I was young, boys, young age boys, especially in March, would fly kites, okay? Always fun. Get you a couple of big balls of kite string, see how high you get that thing. See if you can make that kite get up there close to the airplane. Pilots may not like that much. Yeah, I figured you'd like that. But anyway, I have played around the bee yard some, get out past the bee yard, big open area, right? We got a break in the timber, or maybe a creek line, some kind of ground definition. And the kite tail that you tie on there, tie you a yellow kite tail on there, okay? Old piece of yellow cloth to tear up. You know how you have to tie a tail on a kite? And let that bad boy get on up there, okay? And I'm talking about several hundred feet. Guess what you'll find? If you're in near or in a drone concentration area, you'll have hundreds of drones following that yellow kite tail. Why? Yellow, we know, is one of the bees' favorite colors. I think they can see it better. And let's face it, drones have big eyes. They're better to see you with. And so I think they're drawn to that color. I think just out of curiosity. They know it's not a queen. There's no scent there. But I think the color will draw them. And I've seen where it'd be a bunch of drones following a yellow kite tail. What else is going on? I don't know. Okay, another question. Yes?
Yeah, Bryan, you just returned from an extended trip to Vietnam. Did you have any opportunity to observe beekeeping in Vietnam? And is there anything you feel would be worthwhile sharing with the group?
I did have a chance to work bees in Vietnam. Kind of stumbled on some beekeepers, but there was a pretty big language barrier. Their hives were somewhat unique. They were very similar to the Langstroth. The bees were very gentle, and I'm not sure if they were Italians or not. Like I said, there was an obvious language barrier. I do not speak Vietnamese, so. But they were really glad to see my interest and share smiles and points and laughs, and shared a jar of honey with them, and they were really glad I did that and very happy. So. But no, we didn't get to really discuss anything. So.
Okay, any more questions? Okay. Yes, go ahead.
It's for Bryan. What do you do in the fall for rural mite control?
Oh, man.
I was really hoping that question wouldn't get asked. Somehow it always does. A wise beekeeper once told me, and I mean no offense by this whatsoever, there's plenty of stuff that's legal on the market that you can choose from. But if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't need to. That's the way it was put to me, and it took me a lot of years to need to know, I guess.
Okay, let's use a little transition. We're going to transition immediately. We'll let these gentlemen stay here, and we're going to do a hive report. Right now, what's hives doing? We hope they're building up. I'm getting a lot of phone calls, and those hives are not building up. The phone calls I'm getting from people, it's the old bees that got X's on their eyes. What happened? Dead. Some of them I can understand. They say lots of bees in the comb, head first in the comb. The whole bottom board's full of dead bees. There's honey up there. There was a super or two honey on top. What happened? Bees starved. Other people are telling me, wow, that colony here 2 months ago, a month ago, was flying pretty good. I thought they looked pretty good. I go back and guess what? I see no bees flying, opened up. I see 2 or 3 just dead bees or stragglers hanging on the comb. There's no other bees in it. There's no bees on the bottom board. What happened? Sick.
Varroa mites, some kind of virus. What did they do for varroa mites last fall? I didn't have any mites.
That's it. Didn't have any mites. Usually, I point to, hey, that's a varroa mite problem. That's a varroa mite problem normally. Of course, Bryan doesn't like to hear it, but I think we disagree on this a little bit. I still like to think that Nazima raises its ugly head some. And Nosema can be a bigger influence, weakening bees, and they just don't have that spirit to survive, shall we say. And again, I think we've all been that way. If you get a hind gut, for lack of a better term, ailment, there's times where you say, oh, this is bad. I'm cashing it in. Well, I think sometimes the bees think that way too, with a real high spore count on Nosema. So I think Nosema is a factor. Anybody wants to comment? No, they were shaking their heads.
As to bee losses?
Yeah,
I can't disagree with Bob, although I don't treat for Nosema. I do think that it rears its ugly head, particularly in my smaller nukes that seem to also have moisture problems. That's when I see it the most. Same with European foul brood. That's when it flares up. And if you have a bunch of bees, you will see it. It's just inevitable. But my question always goes back to the varroa mites. I mean, and that fall treatment. And more importantly than that fall treatment, because my fall treatment is just a cleanup treatment. The treatment that you're concerned with is the summer, and I will tell you I use Apicard for that. Because it's the one treatment that you can use half that dose up to 105 degrees. And you need to be doing that in July. Because we're gonna think bee math again. And you need fat bees going into winter. Fat bees are raised in September. If you treat your bees in August, you may have got rid of the mites that were there in August, but you need to get rid of the mites that are there in July, because the mites are not what's killing your bees, it's those viruses. So just because you kill the mites today, those adult bees live 6 to 8 weeks. Those mites are already in that pupa. So you've got, up to 10, 12 weeks of viruses already in that hive. So that's where your summer treatment really comes into play, bee math.
Yeah, here again, it goes back to the mite treatment. I've had a few phone calls. I've had the dead bees, bees dead head first in the cell. Well, why did they freeze to death? Bees don't freeze to death. Well, the cluster got so small they didn't build up in the fall that they couldn't move to get to the food. The food's there, but it's 4 degrees. That cluster this big can't move to get to that honey. So it all goes back to the mites.
And that's the sign of those viruses. So sick people die young, right? Once the virus load gets to a certain point. So your bees look really good in September, October, November, but you didn't get those viruses under control in time. It's going to cause those bees to die early. And then it also, it seems like, it's very similar to Nosema when it flares up, the way you start having those hive numbers dwindle down this time of year especially.
Real quick again, like they pointed out and stuff, people say that their bees starved to death. Well, or they froze to death head first over there. Well, if you had a big healthy bunch of bees there or something, that probably wouldn't happen unless we had, now I know this year we had that string of about 10 days of really low temperatures or something, and I did have some of my bees that I thought were pretty strong hives and stuff, and I found them head first in the thing about this far away from honey all around them. I guess they did, and it was a good bunch of bees that I thought should have survived. But most of the time it's because you didn't start out with a good number of bees, good healthy bees to start with, and then it got so small that the few left of them may have starved to death, but that wasn't the real reason.
Something I noticed this past year that I attribute really having a lot of successful late season splits with was we had a lot of dry weather late in the year. You have to be flexible with your beekeeping. This past summer was the first summer that I ever went through hundreds of pounds of pollen patties. We were in a dearth, a serious dearth. My late summer splints had plenty of syrup because I was giving it to them, but they weren't bringing in pollen. So that's where experience and management and paying attention to your bees and their needs. On a normal year, there's plenty of crepe myrtle pollen coming in through the summer. We're not looking for lots of brood. Even on my splits, there's enough pollen trickling in through the summer for those bees to raise brood. There's 3 parts to the brood equation. And that is temperature, which comes from bee populations this time of year and from the summertime in the summer. There's nectar and there's pollen. If you take any one of those parts of that equation away, it's really hard to raise bees. So having good nutrition on those bees in the fall is also important to get those bees healthy to go in the winter, getting your winter bees fattened up.
Okay, good discussion on that. Hive report format here, you gotta remember, kind of like Brian's saying, that three-part equation. I've always heard as a beekeeper, to get a healthy frame of brood, cap brood, what does it cost the bees? It costs them 1 frame of pollen and 1 frame of honey to make a frame of brood. And I think that's pretty well true. They just can't do it with one resource. So that's a good point to make. Between now and next month, what would we recommend doing? Look at your hives, and I'd say, be sure you got feed on them. This time of year, and it's gonna be cool yet, just cause it's warm today. Don't think it's not gonna be some cool nights and cool yet. I still suggest fondant, put fondant right on the frames where they can get to it. That's very important. They love fondant, they love it. And I'd go ahead and say, keep at least a part of a pollen patty on there. The days it rains or it's too cool to fly, guess what? They'll utilize that pollen patty. I see bees, again, I'm talking about good quality pollen patties now, not something that Mike would make here. But anyway, when I see bees taking that pollen patty and storing it in the cells, headbutting it in there like they would natural pollen, that tells me they like it and it's a good pollen source. Otherwise, and again, some of the old pollens we used to make up and dry feed outside, you see them on a better day, especially when the red maples are blooming like they are now, you see them dragging that stuff outside. The whole ground out front will be white when they're dragging out that pollen substitute because it's inferior. Bees know the difference. I'd say keep some fondant on them and keep a pollen patty on them. Let them have it. Build up that colony as good as you can build it up. Worry about that swarming a little later. Not right now, not in the next month. Anybody want some discussion on that?
Said I was just looking yesterday and today at my hives and stuff. It seems they're bringing in a lot of pollen right now. There's a lot of gray ash looking pollen that I think was from the red maple maybe or something. I even saw a little purple, red, deep violet stuff. I think that's from the hen bin. It's out there, and there's just fields of this stuff around now that the bees are feeding off of. So, and I've still got some pollen substitute in the hives. They're not touching it right now, but again, if the weather turns bad, a couple weeks, it's supposed to go back to normal temperatures here in about a couple weeks or something. I'm still going to keep it in there and just see what they do. But right now, it looks like they've got enough pollen that they're bringing in that's fresh. They're even bringing in, it looks like to me, they're even bringing in a little bit of nectar, things from different things. But I'm still going to keep an eye on them for at least the next month or so.
What's that bright yellow pollen?
Bright yellow pollen?
Bright yellow, right now?
Well, last week.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's Mahania. Winter holly, Mahania.
Yeah, I'm
Or
keeping
with
it.
grape holly, some people call it, winter holly, some people call it.
I think you got some right behind you, Bob.
Here somewhere, I'm sitting on.
I haven't seen it. I don't know where they're finding it.
They're out, that's a very popular old-timey landscape.
It's an old-time landscape plant, kind of like waste areas, to be honest. You'll see it lots of times in little damp waste areas. Bees will love it. I've seen bees line up waiting their turn to get to it. We can use more of this stuff around. I can tell you right now, people don't, think much of it. But it is a very good bee plant from the standpoint of this time of year. But the pollen is real yellow on it, real yellow.
So for y'all that don't know, I'm a plant person by trade. And there are some new varieties out of the Mahonia that also bloom and produce a lot of pollen that are improved varieties for landscapes, and it's an excellent shade landscape plant. So.
In all my hives, I've got pollen patty and fondant on them now, but if you got a little weak hive you're trying to build up, be careful with the pollen patties because the small hive beetles like it more than the bees do. If you put a full pollen patty on a little weak hive, the hive beetles are going to explode.
So yeah, I'm feeding some light. I switched over to light syrup on my stronger colonies. My weaker colonies have some sugar candy on them, fondant. And it makes me feel good that y'all are still feeding pollen because I just ordered a few more 100 pounds and plan to keep on feeding it because it is going to get cold. And right now you're walking that line in a different way. Your bees there's plenty of nectar and pollen for your bees out there right now, but they're limited by foraging weather. We have to remember that they're not going to forage much below 55 degrees. So, like Bob said, you have to be wary of that, and if it gets cold and rainy for a few days, you have to make sure they have plenty of food. These colonies are also consuming a ton of food right now. One thing I am doing and have been doing for the past couple weeks on warmer days, if it's going to be warm for a couple days, is I take a capping scratcher with me, and if, say, my cluster's in the bottom still and I have several frames of capped honey in the top, I will uncap a frame of honey for them and put it back in there, because right now they struggle with uncapping that honey because they need moisture on non-flight days. It's hard for them to get the water to uncap it and dilute that honey with, so I go ahead and uncap it for them in some situations. And I'm also a big fan of the snail growth boards right now, double screens for my early week colonies, to provide one of those elements in that equation, which is heat. So I can put a weak colony above a strong colony, and then add a few frames of brood to them and really boost them up quick.
Okay, all good points, very good points, I like it. I would say on a stronger colony, before next month, you might want to think about reversal. And all those bees, and that brood's up in that top box, whatever that box looks like, you don't care. When most of that activity is up around that top, I'd say go ahead and reverse it. Now, the old caution there is a line again. If that brood is in both boxes, okay, split between the two sections, don't reverse it. Because if you do that, you just separate that brood. There's a gap there between them. And the bees will pick one or the other to go to maintain temperature. So you've lost brood, is what it boils down to. You're going to chill that brood. So they got to be either in one box or the other. And if they're in the top box, which most time, this time of year they are, you can just do a simple reverse, and that gives them more room, that queen more room to come on up, to lay, and everything works good. Bees want to work up. Okay, let's go into the flower report here a little bit. We got a couple examples here. Yep, apple trees. Apples are blooming. Not all apples are blooming. There's a few isolated apples blooming. At my house, there's not even buds on mine already yet, because my apple trees are normal apple trees. This has come off Irish Taylor Road. One of them did. I don't know where the other came from. But I've seen a few scattered ones blooming. Matter of fact, I went by Bob's today hoping that he'd have apples ready to eat, but they weren't ready yet. But again, you do see some scattered fruit trees blooming. The pears, the Bradford pears is trying to crack open. Are Bradford pears beneficial to bees? No, bees will not work them. It totally will not work them. They look okay, I guess, but bees won't work them. Now, I've got down in the woods right below my house, it's an old pear, and it's not an eatable pear. It's a peck, it makes pears, but they're hard as rocks. They ain't but about that big. Squirrels love them, but I don't know anything else that eats them. Oddly enough, over the last day or two, it's starting to bloom, which kind of surprised me. I mean, it's in a shaded location, and it's starting to bloom now. The main thing I see bees working, as far as that goes, henbit. Henbit's a favorite right now. Henbit is doing really good right now. They work it both for pollen and for nectar, for both. Again, that pollen is that real reddish, what's the word I want to use for that? Crimson, incandescent is the word I'm looking for. It's got that real incandescent look to it. It's beautiful stuff. But you can always see it on the hind legs coming in. You know they work in henbit, and that's a good source for them. I've actually seen some of the strong colonies actually make a super honey on henbit. That can happen. That's a good thing. I do see dandelions blooming. Of course, they bloom a little bit year-round for us, but I do see some dandelions blooming. I see some quince. You know what the flowering quinces look like? It's a real red, orangey looking blossom. They're blooming, just have started blooming in the last couple of days. Bees love them. Bees really work the hell out of them. I've seen some of that blooming. I've seen some, what do they call them? Crocus, that's the word I'm looking for. I see some crocus blooming. Now, you may have some, what do you want to call them, daffodils in your yard. People call them buttercups, I think sometimes. Bees will not work those, okay? Bees don't work them. But crocus is a different story. Bees will work crocuses, and they do like crocus. Only problem I have with crocus, the bulbs are too expensive to buy and set out. And then when I do set them out, what happens then? Squirrels eat them. So anyway, yeah. So,
You have to catch a squirrel first,
Hunter's got that story for me. But we got more and more stuff blooming. I do see some other buds starting to swell a little bit. So again, the bees have enough to work on right now. The red maples, depends on where you are. I've actually seen some red maples that's over. They're too far along.
Silvers and sugars are starting now.
They just started, yeah.
yeah.
Slippery elm, bees will work slippery elm. I do see some of them starting to bud out a little bit, but the red maple has been a good source. Again, some of it is too far gone right now, but again, they're working some of the sugar maples now, which is an excellent source for them, no doubt. So again, the bees are getting a little bit more, that looks encouraging. So, what can you do? Okay, we finished with that, gentlemen? I appreciate it. Let's give these boys a good hand.